Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here, coming to you with another Anatomy of a Bad Poll. This week featuring Ekos. Conservative maintain a small lead. So, why? Why is this a bad poll? Well, remember from last time, there's a few steps for this. First, we go here and we look at opinion polling. Because this is a poll. We compare it to its recent friends. So, all the polls publicly released since September 10th are up here. And we're going to ignore this Nanos one because Nanos is rolling polling. So this does contain, this one published here, three samples before Pollster became leader. So it is not directly comparable to these other six. Or other five. No, it's six. I was right. The other six. So what do we have? Well, Abacus plus 5. Ekos plus 2. Ledger plus 6. Ipsos plus 5. Angus Reid plus 7. Main Street plus 8. Oh. Well. All the online polls are between 5 and 7. So let's be generous and say an average of a lead of 6. Okay. And then we have the IVR polls and 2 to 8. Something's wrong there. That's not within margin of error of each other. All the online polls are. And in fact, Main Street is within margin of error of the rest of them for the headline number, for the lead. The actual raw numbers, Main Street is not within margin of error of Ipsos, Ledger, or Abacus. Well, I guess not yeah, but it is within margin of error of Angus Reid. And Angus Reid, Ipsos, Ledger, and Abacus are all within margin of error of each other on just the subsamples. So Main Street might be a bit of an outlier, but it's not an aggressive outlier. Because as I said, the lead itself is within margin of error. The exact sample might be anomalous, but it might not be anomalous. Because again, Main Street is actually the most recent poll conducted, well, tied with Angus Reid. So these two are actually very similar and within margin of error. The other ones are older. So, some debate there. But of all of them, Ekos is wildly different. Yes, it's technically by the closest term within margin of error of Ledger on samples, but the headline, no, it's not within margin of error. I guess if you overlap the margin of errors, it is, but that's kind of a questionable way to do things. That's a very unlikely scenario. So it is wildly out there. It has the conservatives lower than everybody else, even Ledger, which is lowballing, or which has the conservatives quite low in of themselves. It has the liberals higher than everyone except Main Street. And as I said, Main Street is probably slightly anomalous by itself, but not outrageously so. And the rest of these subsamples look relatively fine. The big one here is the conservatives versus the liberals. No polls have this kind of configuration here, so that already puts out a red flag. By itself, I must stress here, this isn't anything that exciting by itself. It's anomalous. I might personally discount the poll. But with Ekos, this goes deeper. Because there's been a lot of things recently with Ekos that really makes me doubt that they're even a credible pollster. So to start with, let's look at some of their track record. This was 2021. Conservative lead of +1, let's say 33.7 to 32.6. Ekos last poll, they did good on the liberals, I suppose, but they were down 6.4 percentage points on the conservatives. That's an outrageous miss. That's huge. Sure, the rest of their subsamples, like other than, well, their NDP and the block subsamples are acceptable, but Green Party and People's Party are also outrageously off. So Here we have them having a very outrageous miss. You compare them to some of the better pollsters in Canada. Abacus slightly underestimated the Conservatives and Liberals, but they have the right lead, and they slightly overestimated the NDP, but not outrageously so. Main Street slightly a large underestimation on the Conservatives there for Main Street, and the rest, their subsamples are solid, except for the Bloc, I suppose, and the People's Party. So let me remind this. Main Street did pretty poorly on this one, relatively speaking. Where is Ledger in this list? I can't see Ledger, but Ipsos, +1 lead, just slightly underestimating Liberals and Conservatives. Big overestimate in the NDP, same story with Angus Reid. And Ledger down here is almost spot on. Slight underestimate, but not much. So as you can see here, against the main pack, only one that's does somewhat poorly is Main Street. Main Street is significantly better than Ekos. And we go to 2019. Oh, and we're starting to see the same story. Ekos has another 5.4 lead miss. Significantly overestimating the Liberals and significantly underestimating the Conservatives. This is a big underestimation. We pop down to 2011, and we see the opposite, actually. They nail the Conservatives, and they wildly underestimate the Liberals. This is a huge miss. We're talking like 4 points, and more importantly, this is probably the difference between a majority and a minority government level miss. So this is quite a bad miss, in fact. We go back to 2011, and what do we see? Oh, we see almost a 6% miss. Oh, well, okay, and they, again, wildly overestimate the Greens. Kind of a track record with them. Though, to be fair, it might possibly be the polling method overestimating the Greens' IVR. But, again, massive miss on the Conservatives. And no one else really has that massive miss. Forum is a little bit of Forum is a little, like a 3.6, so that's not particularly great, but Forum is typically like a B tier pollster in Canada. There's nothing wrong with their polls, they're just not as good as the core group. Though actually Ledger does similar here, so maybe we give an Ekos benefit on the doubt on this one, that even with that, actually, again, Ledger, Angus Reid, Ipsos, Forum, Abacus, they all miss, but Ekos misses by a significant margin from them. So again, pretty big miss. We go down to 2008. What's the story? Another quite large miss from Main Street. Not Main Street, sorry, Ekos. Nanos also has a relatively big miss here. But again, you see other ones like Angus Reid, very close. And other ones that are relatively close to the polling date, down here, Ipsos. Ipsos doesn't do that great either. But the thing is, every single time, Ekos is having a big miss. Some of these pollsters occasionally have a big miss, but it's every single election so far. We go back down to 2006, and what do we see? This one's actually also a big miss for the Liberals this time. They have the Liberals almost 3 points behind where they're estimated. So it's not just strictly speaking that Ekos is underestimating Conservatives, though they have tended to do that more as time has progressed. And all the way back down to 2004 here, I believe this is... Oh, we don't even know the... Oh, here we go. Again, another large Liberal miss. So early on they missed Liberals a lot, now they seem to be missing Conservatives more. Either way, their methodology is very flawed because they keep having big misses election after election, significantly bigger typically than their competitors. And their competitors, such as Ledger, Ledger, Ipsos, Angus Reid, Main Street, etc., they've tended to get better with time. Ekos hasn't. That's the important thing. That makes me doubt the legitimacy of them as an organization because they're not getting better with time. Who they're wildly underestimating changes, but that doesn't make it better. I don't care that you might not be biased in how you're wildly missing. The fact that you keep wildly missing means you're not useful, because how can I, as a modeler, use your polls if you keep missing by large margins? I could keep going further forward, but we start before 2004. We start getting kind of iffy in regards to polling publicly available on Wikipedia. So we've established a track record here where it seems very implausible, that Ekos reliably has big misses. But there's other things about this particular poll that seem unlikely. Here, from their last poll to this one, the Conservative lead shrinks. Abacus, bigger lead. Ipsos, bigger lead. Ledger, bigger lead. Angus Reid, bigger lead. Main Street, bigger lead. So, wait a minute. The other 5 pollsters, if we go back here, these 5 all have a bigger lead reported. Abacus went up by 4. Ledger went up by 11. I think this Ledger poll was an outlier. But still, they went up by 11. Main Street down. Wait, was that the most recent Main Street? This is the most recent Main Street. The lead actually went down, but the Conservative vote share went up, which I think is the main thing, because the big one isn't the lead per se, it's that Ekos is showing the Conservative vote share decreased. Again, vote share down. Everybody else has it going up. We scroll down here. Let's see. When was the last Angus Reid poll? Might have been ages ago. Maybe I'm blind. Ipsos here, we can see lead went up by 2. So I'm not going to search for the Angus Reid one because it doesn't seem to be posted here. And I'm blind. But I think that crosses the point. Every other major pollster shows the Conservatives gaining support. The position of the Liberals may or may not gain support. The NDP may or may not be gaining support. But the Conservatives, everyone else agrees, is gaining support. And it seems to be roughly, other than Ledger, which I think is was a wild out. The August poll for Ledger was a wild outlier. Everyone else seems to be it's about 2 points. Here, Ekos is showing a 2-point decrease because the last Ekos poll had them at 35.4. So, not only are they bucking the trend, they're bucking the trend by almost the exact opposite of what the trend seems to be, which is very questionable. Then we add other things where Frank Graves has previously said on Twitter that he will do anything he can to stop Poilievre from winning, which, considering Poilievre is the leader of the Conservatives and he has likely completely missed them in this polling cycle, that really casts doubt on his intentions here and the legitimacy again. And then we scroll down. The regionals look reasonable except Ontario. The Ontario one looks completely wrong, which likely, if there is either, if you want to call it either intent or just incompetence, that seems to be where it's coming from, because the rest of them look okay. This one is completely out of line with everyone else. Everyone else seems to have the Conservatives either tied or slightly leading. And Ekos has them down by 9. That's a very big difference. Go here. This again, it seems okay, though the age young is kind of lowballed, but again, not that wild. Here, nothing seems extremely anomalous. Okay. And then we get into the worst part of this poll, and why this poll is completely garbage. Vote intention by disinformation. So what is disinformation? We're going to get to that in a second. But they asked their polling sample this question. This is an incredibly biased question. It has no correlation to anything. It has no meaning at all. There's no way you can wait for it. There's no way you can use it. It doesn't, because it's a completely arbitrary metric that they've developed. So we have already a big red flag here. Now, I won't go into the survey questions because, as listed, this was asked after vote intention. But when you start having extremely biased questions here, it does cast doubt, in my mind, on the efficacy and the good faithness of asking this question, or of this poll. So we're going to scroll down and skip some of this stuff and look into what the definition of the disinformation index is. So it's a 12-point scale. You get 3 points for every statement you say is completely true, 2 for everyone that you said is mostly true, and 1 point if you skip the question, i.e. you did not call it false. Okay, so what are the things? I'll just zoom in right here so it's pretty clear. The reported number of COVID-19 deaths is being exaggerated. Vaccine-related deaths are being concealed from the public. COVID-19 vaccines can cause infertility, and COVID-19 vaccines can alter a patient's DNA. Now, I've never heard a single person say this one. Someone might have, but I've heard a lot of these other 3. So this one just seems kind of weird. But more importantly, let's look at these other 3. These are all, according to Ekos, disinformation. Okay. So starting out back to front, we have COVID-19 vaccines linked temporarily changed in the menstrual cycle. New study confirms. CTV News. Oh, so if they affect the menstrual cycle, is it not that wild that someone might believe they can cause infertility? I don't know categorically if they cause infertility or not, but CTV News is reporting that they can affect the menstrual cycle. So, if it can affect the menstrual cycle, which is intrinsically linked to fertility, it's not a jump for anyone to assume it causes or can cause infertility. And I don't have many other sources pulled up here because it wasn't that important, but there is several other places too that have put doubt on this. Okay. Vaccine-related deaths are being concealed from the public. Huh, okay. Well, we have another CTV News article here. Death with unknown cause, now Alberta's top killer. Wait? Ill-defined and unknown causes? This has never been the top cause of death before. Never. Normally it's known, unsurprisingly. And ill-defined and unknown causes? Huh, why would that be happening? Is there something that a lot of people did at the same time in 2021 that was different than every other year on record? Maybe. And then we have further considerations with this. The Chief Medical Officer of Ontario said that there's a 1 in 5,000 chance of causing myocarditis. That's a very high chance, and myocarditis is a very serious heart condition that if you are already overly exerting yourself or you're overly stressed might cause a heart attack and you might die. Oh, okay. And what's more, the entire nation of Denmark is banning vaccines for people under the age of 50. Why would they be doing that? Is it because that they might cause harm to people? And I did not think to get this study here. Let's see if I can bring it up. Here we go. From the Gateway Pundit, I don't know how good this site is, per se, but I have no reason to doubt this news report because it's reporting on a study, and this study from scientists from Harvard and Johns Hopkins found COVID-19 vaccines 98 times worse than the virus for under 30s. Not listed in the title here, but if you read down through the article, you can see it, and you can read the study here, which is why this seems relatively credible site, because it literally links you the study. Maybe that site and that study are wrong, perhaps, but is that, what is it now? Wait, four different sources I've just listed to you that are all suggesting that, oh, maybe the vaccines aren't safe for everybody. Maybe there should have been medical discretion based off of a person and their doctor on whether it was a good idea or not. And maybe some people who shouldn't have gotten the vaccine got the vaccine and they might have died. And if that's not being publicly said, that would be being concealed. So this is likely literally true. And in this last one, this one is also just true in at least some jurisdictions. I cannot vouch for Canada, but I know many jurisdictions in the US have listed anyone who died with COVID as dying from COVID. And there's a big difference. If you have COVID and die of stage 4 cancer, you died of stage 4 cancer. Some people might argue that maybe the COVID pushed you over the edge. And sure, maybe the final descent into death was triggered by COVID, but regardless of getting COVID or not, you were going to die really soon because you had stage 4 cancer. I cannot tell you how often this happened, how many people this happened to, or categorized this way, but I can tell you that this did happen. So it is not unreasonable for a Canadian to think that this is also happening in Canada. Whether it actually is or not is a different question, because again, I've not exhaustively looked at Canadian records, so I don't know myself. But when you're talking about disinformation, that is something that's maliciously spread on purpose to confuse people. That is what the term means. Maybe at best, Ekos could argue these two are misinformation. Maybe there are no COVID vaccine-related deaths. Very skeptical, considering Denmark and the chief medical officer of Ontario's positions. And I've also seen chief medical officers of U.S. states echo similar sentiment. I think Florida was one offhand. The chief medical officer of Florida, whatever his exact job title is. And, well, this one, that's a pretty easy one to draw from CTV News. Vaccines linked to temporary changes in menstrual cycle. So, what am I saying with this? Well, it seems like they're an extremely biased pollster who has a track record of completely missing every single election result, more or less, in the last 20 years. Well, the rest of the competitors have gotten better, they have gotten worse, and the leader of the company, Frank Graves, has gone on public record. He has since deleted the tweet, but it's the internet, you can find it if you want to look for it, saying he wants to do anything he can to stop Poilievre. So what a better way to smear the Conservative Party than to come up with a meaningless void index like this that makes their supporters look like rubes who are dumb or easily misled, and the virtuous liberals holding the tide because they accept what the mainstream media tells them and nothing else. They can't do their own research. Haha. Okay, so again, like the Angus Reid poll from June, where the Poilievre was being polled at 34, the same level as Charest, it's not one thing that's putting doubt on this poll. It's the track record of Ekos, the public statements of Frank Graves, the inclusion of this meaningless, likely intentionally designed to smear disinformation index, and very importantly, that they are reporting the exact opposite trend of every other pollster. That makes this poll garbage. This isn't an outlier poll. This looks like a poll that was done with a political motivation, and polls done with political motivations are basically worthless. Does this mean I will never use Ekos polls again? It depends. I have used them in Quebec because there just wasn't as many polls as I would like. But it does mean if I do use them, it is on a very much case-by-case basis. And likely will not be using them at all federally. The statements from Frank Graves about Polliev and this now inclusion of the disinformation index here, among other things, really makes you doubt the legitimacy of this company. The rest of his sample tables, we go over here. Just to quickly go through these. These are the more thoroughly broken down versions. Again, nothing incredibly outrageous here. Like nothing other than Ontario. Ontario just clearly looks wrong, which if you were to be intentionally skewing a poll, or if I wanted to intentionally skew a poll, this is something I might do because, well, if he was just a little closer to everybody else, this might have been believable. Unfortunately, everyone else polled at the same time, and wildly different Ontario numbers, so this no longer becomes believable. Am I saying that the Ekos intentionally polled or put the wrong numbers in Ontario? No. But I'm saying that this looks extremely unrealistic, and everything else does not give me confidence in the firm to give them the benefit of the doubt. And I will just reiterate once again, weighted total. Oh, how the heck are you weighting by disinformation index? There's no, like, that's not a survey census question. How are you weighting by trust of the federal government? Again, this is something you might do if you want to skew your results. Because it looks like he's picking some categories to weight more heavily than others. Why? I don't know. Does it affect the poll significantly? I don't know. I didn't calculate it. But that is a big red flag. And combined with everything else, this is a bad poll from a bad pollster who I really think should not get even one iota of the oxygen they get. All of that. I bid you do on this one. If you like this kind of video, please let me know because I can keep doing them. I would say I could do more, but I really don't want to do more of these because I don't like it when polls are bad. It really destroys the credibility of this industry and what I do when people start doing stuff like this, which looks like flagrantly biased polling. Though admittedly, we are not at US levels where they objectively overrepresent people in their sampling. Looks at Economist, who loves to overrepresent Democrats in their polls. Overweight the Democrat sample from the YouGov polls. But otherwise, do the YouTube things for me, and I will see you Sunday with a final Quebec update.